All right. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in from. Welcome to young readers and adults alike. Thank you for joining us for another virtual reading on P22's Facebook page. My name is Karina Domingo. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Urban Wildlife Program Manager at the National Wildlife Federation, California. I'll be facilitating today's events. But before we get started, I just want to let everybody know that if you missed any of our previous virtual readings, we read Cougar Crossing, P22 The Park, P22 The Journey with our special guests. You can actually access those recordings anytime in the video section on P22's Facebook page. This event will also be recorded, so if at any time you need to step away, you can check back on the page for the full recording after the program has concluded. But let us know where are you tuning in from, comment in the fields below. And I'm just going to go ahead and introduce our special guest today, Frances. Frances grew up in Eastern Kentucky, where she learned to love living near wildlife. Always a writer and editor, she now directs the Creative Services Department at the Great Smoky Mountains Association and edits Smoky's Life magazine. She's the editor of the 2019 Great Smoky Mountains Association title, Back of Beyond, a Horace Kepfer biography, which won the Thomas Wolfe Memorial Literary Award that same year. So congratulations, Frances. She also authored a collection of autobiographical essays. And what we're reading today, A Search for Safe Passage, is her first book for young readers. Welcome, Frances.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
And then, of course, joining us is Beth Pratt. Beth, I will let you introduce yourself. Go ahead.
Well, I think the quickest introduction is Cougar Lady, but I'm the regional executive director for California for the National Wildlife Federation and lead the Save LA Cougars campaign to build the world's largest crossing outside Los Angeles. And I think, as a colleague of mine said recently, Mike Leahy in the New York Times, the time of wildlife crossings has come. And I am a firm believer in that. We know the science is there, the public is there, and most importantly, we got to fix this problem. And I think Frances's book is such a wonderful introduction, that really, from the animal's point of view, really details what they're going through. I think, we all see roadkill and it breaks my heart, but I don't think we give a lot of thought to what that really means for the animals. We take roads for granted. So Frances, I can't thank you enough. I was, lucky enough Frances, you wanted to get this right. You sent me early review copies. So it's been wonderful to see this book evolve from an incredible idea that you had, Frances, to a finished product that is, I can't recommend enough for people wanting to understand, and a fun read for kids to really learn some science, but in a really imaginative way, which is, looking at it through an animal's eyes. And so thank you so much, Frances. And special shout out to a good friend of mine, Laurel Rematory, who I know, Frances, you work with back in the Great Smokies, who I worked with in Yosemite, and I think was one of the ways we connected. But this is a great book, and I know you're going to enjoy today. Frances will be reading from it and just talking about a little bit about what went into it, and also the crossing project there. I mean, that's one of the things. Liberty is by no means the first or the last wildlife crossing project that we need to get built. So then I think there's a lot of really interesting parallels, and your project is really different from Liberty, but just as needed. So you'll learn a little bit more about a crossing project that also is being worked on the East Coast. So Frances, I know you're in, thank you again for writing this book, and everybody, you're in for a real treat listening to her read from it and listening to her, how she came to write this. So anyway, thank you all. And thanks, Frances. And P22 says thank you too.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us for a minute, Beth. We'll see you on the flip side. Have a great day. But as Beth said, we're going to be reading from Frances's book today. And so A Search for Safe Passage tells a story of best friends, Bear and Deer, who grew up together on the north side of a beautiful Appalachian gorge. In the time of their grandparents, animals could travel freely on either side of a fast flowing river. But now the dangerous human highway divides their home range into the north and south sides. And so this book is aimed at readers 7 to 13, but all can enjoy this great text. Frances is going to kick us off by sharing some of the background on the book first. And after that, we're going to be moving into the virtual reading. And so please stick around for that portion of the program. And Frances, I will pass it off to you for your presentation.
Thank you so much, Corinna. It's great to be here. We're going to share just a few screens of a PowerPoint that will help you just know a little bit about this project that we're working on. So A Search for Safe Passage is based on a real place. And if you go to the next slide, this is showing you the cover of the book, which Beth was holding. And as we said, it's for ages 7 through 13, but it's also kind of a fable that can be enjoyed by adults as well. And there's a lot of adult humor. And we have lots of full color illustrations and photos of wildlife in the book to enjoy. And the most important thing is it's got a fun story, but also some information and education in the back so that teachers could actually use it with classrooms in like 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th grade type of material. So we'll go on to the next slide. And this just shows you that there are 8 chapters. They're fairly short. And then the back part of the book is the educational section, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. This shows you kind of what the book looks like on the inside with a big full color illustration with each chapter. There are footprints in each chapter that kids can identify and tell which animals go with what footprints. And then there's a small inset illustration, a detail in each chapter as well. And we have the section in the back that shows the 19 species that are in the book. And you get to learn a little bit about their lives and how they live their lives, and also how they're affected by having roads nearby. Also in the back of the book, we show different types of wildlife crossings, and we talk about what species likes to use them and how they're made and how much they cost. And there's also a song that's in the back of the book. This is the sheet music for Safe Passage, Animals Need a Hand, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later, and we'll have a surprise song at the end. This is the Pigeon River Gorge, and it's a beautiful wild landscape that's really close to Great Smoky Mountains National Park. So I wanted everyone to get to see this amazing video footage, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about this for a second. This is on Interstate 40 between Asheville, North Carolina and Knoxville, Tennessee. And very rarely would this happen where all of the cars actually stop for the animals to cross. But as you're going to see when we roll this, they actually cross, and there's a couple in their vehicle that are just filming this crossing. So we can go ahead and roll this, and we'll listen to it a couple of times. So that footage has just been an iconic thing for our project, which is way behind the Liberty project. We are probably 7 to 10 years from actually having possibly an overpass or some other type of wildlife crossing structure. But the need is definitely there, and we're so glad that these bears got across safely. So we can go to the next slide. For a couple of years now, we've had researchers working in the gorge to try to find out where the animals are crossing and where we might want to change the roads to help them cross more safely and to help drivers in the gorge also be safe. And our focal species are the 3 biggest ones. the American black bear, the elk, which were reintroduced in the Smokies back about 20 years ago now, and then the white-tailed deer. And these are the animals that can cause the most damage if you happen to hit them with your vehicle. But we hope that the work we're doing is also going to be helpful for things like salamanders and turtles and snakes and smaller species like bobcats and raccoons that need to cross too. This shows how the wildlife is affected when they look down over the road. Research has shown that when they're looking at this highway and trying to figure out where to cross, their heart rate goes up, their respiratory rate increases, and they're just very stressed. So this is something that I wanted to incorporate in the book, is the stress that the animals feel in trying to consider how to cross. Next slide, please. This is a female bobcat in the gorge that is using a culvert that was designed to move water to cross under the road, and she's calling to her kitten to come with her, but the kitten is a little too young to make it up into this culvert. And then a few days later, the next slide shows that the kitten got a little larger. The mother went up into the culvert and she flashes her tail and calls to the kitten, and the kitten struggles and makes it into the culvert and to safety, and they go under the highway this way. So we decided that we wanted to incorporate this in our book, and I wrote the book about a couple of characters, Bobcat and Coyote, that work together to try to scout out safe passages. And so we used that same footage, but we had the coyote be the one that could get up into the culvert, and then the little bobcat is trying really hard, and she finally makes it in too. So you'll read about that in A Search for Safe Passage. And we also incorporated some footage of a bear using a scratch tree to scratch his back, which bears love to do. And so that's what our bear does too. And you can see the image of him there that Emma Dufour, our illustrators, created. Emma also wanted to make a map of the gorge that's sort of a smaller version than the real gorge, and it serves our story perfectly. And she based this on books that she read when she was young that had maps, and I think one of them was called the Redwall series. Some of you may be familiar with that. Next slide. This shows a tunnel that was left. There was a tunnel cut through an area in the Pigeon River Gorge, and over it, the wildlife can still cross. So the highway engineers didn't really realize this when they built it, but they left this wonderful passage where the animals actually do cross in the gorge. And so in the book, when we go to the next slide, you'll see that we incorporated this double tunnel, and we call it the land bridge. And on the next slide, you can see all the animals have a reunion at the end on the land bridge, all 19 species, and down below them is the road. So it's a safe place that they can use the highway safely here, but they need many more places to cross safely. Next slide. Safe Passage, the I-40 Pigeon River Gorge Wildlife Crossing Project, is something that a large group of people have come together to try to help make this road safer, and it may take 5 or 10 years before we are able to do that, but this is just the beginning stages of our project. And here are just a few of the impacts or the things that happen when animals are killed on roads. There are many, many of them that are killed all over the US. There's a lot of property damage, and there's even human injuries and even deaths, which is very, very serious. So we really want to try to make this work and to bring attention to the fact that animals need to cross. This shows one of the famous wildlife crossings in Banff, Canada. It was one of the first ones and very successful. And there are many other ways that animals can cross besides going over top of the road. And we can go to the next slide, and you can see that they can also go through culverts under the road. Fencing is used to help them and guide them down to the places where it's safe for them to cross. And then there's many other ways that they can cross, and we can go to the next slide. And you can see there are bridge extensions, and even signage can sometimes help motorists slow down. And you can go to the next slide and turn it over to Corinna.
Awesome, Francis. That was really cool. And again, welcome everybody. Glad you came to our second live stream. But if you have any questions for Francis on the book, how she created the book, the science of the book, what they're doing to help wildlife, go ahead and pop it in the comments and we'll get to your questions at the end of the program. But for now, we're going to move into the virtual reading part of this event. And before we do that, I just wanted to let everybody know how they can purchase Francis's book. So this is a virtual reading and a signing, meaning that if you order the book from Great Smoky Mountains Association at smokiesinformation.org and want to have it signed by the author and illustrator Emma Dufour, you can call their warehouse and tell them to paste it in a signed bookplate for you before they mail you the book. There's also a telephone number here that you can call. And with that, I just want to first, really, before you get started, Francis, I want to give a huge shout out to the illustrator, Emma Dufour, whose art really made this book come to life for me. The art is so beautiful, and we're going to be displaying some of it during the reading. If you have any questions, again, that come to mind, please put them in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end of the program. And with that, Francis, take it away.
Thank you. So if you happen to have the book, you can turn to page 16, and I'm going to be reading from chapter 3, and the chapter is called Meeting of the Forest Council. Bear was dreaming of ants. There was a rotting log full of them, and he was digging them out with his sharp claws and scooping them into his mouth. He wanted to keep eating them in his dream, but something was making him wake up. A light was shining in his eyes. The moon. Bear sat straight up. The full moon was high in the sky and shining into his den. The Forest Council would be starting soon. Late again, he huffed and he lumbered up, fluffed up his coat with a total body shake, and scratched his back twice on his scratch tree for good measure. He snuffled up a handful of real ants from the rotting log nearby and headed up the slope towards the ridge top. As he scaled the ridge and then sauntered down towards the piney knob, Bear was relieved to hear and smell that now there was much less traffic down on the human highway. His friends were standing, sitting, or lying around in a circle, and Owl was already calling the roll. Bear slipped into the circle between Deer and Snake. Bear liked Snake a lot, even though he was very old, slithered and writhed around, and always smelled like cucumber, so no one else was sitting right next to him. Beast, Bear whispered to Deer. She gave him a look that said, "You're late, but I'm happy to see you." Beast, she said in a hushed tone. Deer, Owl called. Here, said Deer. Firefly? Nearby. Frog? Present and accounted for. Hawk? Standing by. Possum? Present and, it's opossum. Raccoon? Here. Salamander? Pseudo-Triton ruber at your service, said Salamander, who liked to use her scientific name at meetings. Snake? Yes? Asked Snake, as if he had forgotten something. Oh, yes, of course. I'm here. Squirrel? There was an awkward silence, and the full moon was beginning to make its slow descent toward the top of the ridge. Won't be coming, said Hawk in a somewhat judgmental squawk. And it's all my fault, muttered Woodchuck, who had just arrived and looked rather downtrodden and terribly guilty. Bear and Deer exchanged a knowing glance. All right, said Owl, let me finish calling the roll, and then we will talk about what has occurred. Bear, I have already called your name, and I see by the light of this beautiful full moon that you are here now. Turtle? Yes, I'm just barely here, said Turtle in a weak, gurgly voice. Like Snake, she was also very old and apparently out of breath from traveling uphill to the meeting. Now, Woodchuck, said Owl, you may proceed with your account of this afternoon's incident. Wait, said Opossum confidently, and then added more shyly, shouldn't you call his name so that he can say that he's here first? Oh, yes, okay, all right, Owl said, slightly flustered. Woodchuck? I'm here, said Woodchuck gloomily. Please tell us what happened, Deer said sympathetically. We were just munching and nibbling, Woodchuck began. I wasn't paying attention really, and all of a sudden Squirrel darted out into the human highway. I think she saw some of those golden salty sticks that the humans drop. I leaned toward the traffic and whistled really loud like this. Too late. She realized her mistake and panicked. I heard some squeaking and squealing, and then Squirrel was turning, tumbling, twisting, and then I just don't know what all happened. I closed my eyes until it was over. There, Woodchuck. Woodchuck was now sobbing. Al put a large wing around him. We've all seen this happen, and it's never easy. That's why Hawk and I have been doing our scouting missions. Even though we can fly, the human highway has taken some of our ancestors too. So we want to help all of you who are on foot to find safe passage. Ahem, Snake murmured. Ah, yes, said Al, and we want to help those of you not on foot as well. Normally, many of us would naturally be at odds with each other, said Frog, but we're all working together as a team to find a solution for everyone. Al nodded. It's been almost a year since we passed Turtle's Law, in effect making the policy of the Forest Council not to cross the human highway. Turtle chimed in, pleased that she'd been mentioned. As a result of that law, my law, we have basically given up the part of our territory that is now in the south, which has left us with fewer food and water options. Yet some, Al continued, have violated the law, and we have seen the sad consequences even here tonight. Listening to this discussion, Bear began to feel restless. He realized he was pacing, his mind racing, because he was beginning to feel a desperate sense of dread. It was as if his life's purpose was never going to be fulfilled. But we can't give up yet, he said in a huffing voice. There must be some way to get back and forth between the north and the south without having to cross the human highway. There is, said a strange voice from the ridgetop. Everyone looked up in that direction. There, illuminated by the descending full moon, were two huge, strange, lean, mean silhouettes.
That was great, Francis. And I just wanted to also pull up some of these amazing illustrations that weren't in chapter 3, but that we really wanted to make sure that everybody saw. So again, Emma did this fantastic artwork. And do you want to say something about this one before I move on, Francis?
Sure. So this is when Bear and Deer have to make a really hard decision, because Bear can go through a culvert that will help them go to the other side of the highway, but Deer can't go. And it's partly because she's too tall and because her hoofs are rough and they can't hold on to the side of the culvert. And then she has another reason that you'll find out when you read the book.
Awesome. And I also wanted to show this one too. This one is so beautiful.
This is Elk, and Elk is kind of like, if you've ever read the Gandalf, you know, the books that has kind of a character that's a leader and a guide. Elk becomes that guide because he's traveled a lot further than all of the other animals. And so he comes along and helps them learn the way to a safe passage.
Awesome. We'll show some more illustrations too as we go on with the Q&A. But let me take that off the screen so I can see here. And again, if you guys have any questions for Francis, please put them in the chat. Do you want to just summarize kind of chapter 3 and why you chose that chapter for us?
Yeah, I like that chapter because it's kind of illustrating where I started the book in my mind. I wanted to really focus on the character of Bear and how nervous he is and how he feels this really strong calling to go to the other side of the highway. It's like an intuition that he has, but he's very scared to do it. And then when these two characters show up, which are actually Bobcat and Coyote, they become friends with the other animals, but at first they're scary. And so this is a turning point for the Forest Council animals because they have to trust these new figures and try to find a safer way to cross the highway with them.
And I want to call out during your presentation, you showed that incredible footage of the bobcat and the bobcat mom trying to, get up into the culvert. And so you guys created this incredible image. If you want to just say something about this, that video was adorable. I was behind the scenes like oohing and aahing.
Yeah, I loved working with Emma as an illustrator on this because she is a naturalist as well, and she really knows the animals and how they move. She knows their anatomy. Mm-hmm. So it was really cool for her to take that image that we saw earlier and change it into this where Coyote is already in the culvert and Bobcat's struggling. And it's a big struggle for her. And what goes into that is they have a common friend, Fox, who mm-hmm. died on the human highway. And that's where their bond started. And so they're bonded because they want to make it better because they lost Fox. And a really special thing happens in the book where they find one of Fox's young that becomes their friend, which is really cool.
Oh, that is so sweet, and sad about the fox friend, but glad that they were able to find each other. That's a great segue into me asking you how you figured out which characters that you would include, and how you kind of determine their personalities.
Yeah, and it's kind of a funny thing, and some of the people on the audience may know something about the Myers-Briggs personality types, but it's something that I really like because we all have different preferences. Like we choose to, either do things one way or another. Some of us are more introverted and some are extroverted, and we get our energy from people. So I made a chart of all the different personality types, and I assigned each animal one of those based more on kind of how it would act in nature. So I wanted to give them something that would bring the personalities to life. And so that's kind of how I did that.
Oh, I love that. I love how you also used like a framework, an actual personality framework to also inform what species. And so that's really cool. What was your process like, creating this book, Frances? And how long does it take to write something like this?
Yeah, it's really neat. Some people talk about wanting to write a book and they'll cloister themselves away for just a month and say, I'm going to write this whole month. So what I did was when COVID started and I had less ability to get out and socialize with my friends, I took several weekends, and it was literally from March to May, 6 weekends. And all I did during those weekends was just write. And so I did the whole story in about 6 weeks. And it was mostly on the weekends just because I could totally focus. And then after that, when we realized it was going to be a cool book concept, then it took a few more months after that to put together the research that went into the educational section in the back. And then not too long after that, I actually went into a song mode and did a songwriting retreat, and wrote the song to go with the book too.
I love that you included that so much, because when we talk to young readers and young students about the STEM field, right? Science, technology, engineering, mathematics, something that we really like to also talk about and amplify is the A that goes in STEM, right? The art. And so we really love that you included the song in there too, because there are so many ways that we all connect with nature and connect with stories. And so you wrote a folk song about this book. How did that come about? Are you a musician? And then I have a follow-up question, but let me first let you answer that one.
Yeah, so I love music, and I follow a lot of musicians, and one of my favorite ones is named Jonathan Byrd, and he's in Western North Carolina, and he was going to give a songwriting retreat. And when I read about it, I just saw this email come across, and I asked myself, could you write a song? And then I just said, in my mind, I just went, I am an American black bear. Sort of took shape, just as I walked to the coffee pot. So I was like, I'm going to go through the songwriting retreat. And it was wonderful. I had a lot of ideas for it, but Jonathan Byrd helped me to sort of, cultivate it and hone it. And I had it having a very Native American sound, because we have the Cherokee tribe that's here, and they were on this land with the bear and the deer and the elk many, many years ago. So I wanted it to call attention to and honor their way of life. And so it sort of has this Native American sound to it, which I really love. But yeah, it was a weird thing that it just all happened. And I think it just came from passion for the project. I just wanted to do something that was artistic. And as you said, songs and music are a great way to bring advocacy to the public consciousness.
That is great. That's such an interesting process and so creative. And also, shout out to the indigenous peoples that still are using the land and live nearby as well. And just shout out from Cheryl here. Love the illustrations. As an artist myself, I can see that the illustrator loves animals. Yes, the illustrator Emma, she was going to be here, but had some scheduling difficulties. But we love the illustrations as well. And Francis, can you attest to how much Emma loves animals?
Emma spent so much time on this book, and she also was really, really passionate about it. And I mean, she couldn't have done a better job for me as far as making these animals dignified, because, when you're doing an illustration, it's easy to have it go towards a cartoon look. We really didn't want to caricature them. We wanted them to be very dignified as they are in nature, and to really respect how smart they are. They're even smarter than humans. We just don't even know that because our brain goes in a totally different way. She captured that for me, and just gave these animals life and really gave it 3 dimensions that it wouldn't have had otherwise. So I love, love, love working with her. She's just an awesome person.
Yes, shout out to Emma. We miss you. And then I see a comment here from Christine Cook coming in. Thank you, Francis, for writing this wonderful book. My young grandson will love it. Yes, get your copies. It's a beautiful book, and a really awesome story. And do you want to say a little bit about the nonfiction in the back of the book, Francis, that young readers can explore?
Yeah, so what's really neat about my role with this is that I'm kind of like a science interpreter. So I don't know the science to the level that our researchers do, but I work with them and I listen to them, and I try to take the concepts and then bring those forth into the book in a way that's accessible. So I got to work with especially Steve Goodman, who works with National Parks Conservation Association on the research in the gorge. And he had a lot of really great ideas for how to just add little details into it to make the story good. And then he also helped with the back section to make sure that everything that we were talking about with the animals and how the roads affect them was accurate. And to me, it's just really important to show that, we have these fictional animals, but then there are their counterparts, the real animals. And in this book, bear and deer are best friends, but in real life, a bear might eat a baby deer, and that's just the way nature is. So we wanted to be able to, bring out the realities there. And then the other part of the back of the book that talks about how to help animals cross, we had some really neat researchers that have spent their whole lives working on this that informed the back of the book and helped me to get that perfectly accurate. And so that was a really fun part of this. And it's really easy to read. So I can understand it. And I think that most, kids can understand it pretty well too.
No, absolutely. I remember being in elementary school, and the librarian knew me because I went to the library and just devoured and rented every single book on animals there was. I remember there was, 1 to 2 cubbies in the library that was the animal section. And so I know that, like, looking at this book, I would have thoroughly enjoyed this. And the back of the book, with the factual information would have been so interesting to me as well. It would have introduced me to all these species I may not have known about in my own backyard. So I love that.
Yeah. And in the back, Emma has actually put a footprint with each of the animal species, and you can look at the footprints and you can match them to the ones in the chapter. So it's pretty fun to be able to learn footprints. So I recommend that too.
Oh, awesome. Yes, that's really cool. I didn't learn tracking until I was older, so that's great. How did you get started or get interested in road ecology and, end up writing this book? Can you tell us a little bit about your career pathway?
Yeah, so when I was growing up in Eastern Kentucky, I had an idyllic childhood because I grew up at a camp and I could horseback ride and swim and skate and canoe all day.
Nice.
And I was really happy all the time, but the only time I was sad was when I saw animals get hit on the road, and it really bothered me. So I've carried that throughout my life, and now I'm in my 50s, and where I live in East Tennessee, and I travel into Western North Carolina a lot. There's a lot of curvy roads that go through the mountains, just like what we've been seeing. And not too far from where I live, I've seen bears get killed on the road because the baby bears can't get over the big barrier in the middle. And so the mother stays in the road to try to help, and usually one or both, something happens. That's not a good ending. And so I really wanted to do something about that. And so since I started working with Great Smoky Mountains National Park as an interpreter, I reached out to a few people that were working on wildlife crossing ideas. And then that's how this whole idea of the Pigeon River Gorge group got started. And I've just kind of helped it along the way with communications and writing, doing articles, and just whatever I could do with my skills to help advance it.
That is so awesome. I think it's so important for youth to hear about all of our different pathways on how we can contribute to positive things happening to wildlife, right? Wildlife is undergoing so many different challenges throughout the entire world, and a lot of it that is due to human activity. And so I really think it's so important for us to share our individual ways that we got to where we are, because there are so many different pathways and different interests, whether you're interested in art or science or writing, policy. There's so much that you can do to contribute to good change on the planet. If you guys have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I've been seeing some come in. I also want to show, just while we're waiting, I'd like to show a few more illustrations, if that's okay with you. Let's look at this chapter 7 illustration here. Tell me a little bit about what's going on.
So black bears don't have to be black. Some of them are cinnamon, like this bear. She Bear is her name. And some of them are even close to being white. They have different color spectrums. And so this is a really cool scene where Bear had always felt like he needed to cross the highway to the other side, to the south. And he felt like that something was calling him there, and he kept smelling something that was just amazing, and he didn't know what it was. And what it was that he's going there to find his love of his life, his mate. And so he meets She Bear in the woods, and she's sort of shy and being kind of coy, and she's running away from him, but she really likes him. And she finally stops, and when their eyes meet, they know that this is why Bear has traveled to find her. So it's this love story. And, so the book incorporates this wonderful moment. It's a rite of passage where they find each other and they know that they're meant to be together.
Oh, that's so sweet. And a testament to what you were saying earlier about animals' intelligence, right? So like, we know that animals have instincts, right? That's, we have certain instincts that kind of happen automatically. We behave automatically and don't have to think about it because it's sort of hardwired into us as an animal. But, it's also amazing how smart some species are, like you said, when we relocate or move large animals, and then they travel and find their way all the way back without MapQuest or Google Maps. Animals are just so much more smart than we give them credit for. So I love that. And I love that you included a cinnamon bear too, because I often get questions on, are those the same species? So that's really cool to see the different variations. Let's also pop up this one here. This is a beautiful one of all of the animals.
Yeah, this is a neat scene at the very end. And this is where Elk kind of tells the rest of the group that what they need to do now is to communicate with the humans to tell them what their needs are and where they need to cross. And so in a sense, that's what's going on right now, is that we're doing the research, trying to figure out where these animals are crossing, where they're dying, and where it would make sense to have wildlife crossings be a part of the road structure so that they can get there.
Beautiful. I love that compilation of all the characters. And of course, the owl was a big part in this last chapter that you read. So it was good to see him in the art here. I'm seeing a question come in. Where will people be able to buy this book?
Sure. So the book is sold through Great Smoky Mountains Association. That's the publisher. And, if you want to get the book signed, Emma and I have these beautiful book plates that we've already signed, and they can be just placed in that book and mailed right to you if you call that number on the screen.
Awesome. And then let's see, Daniella. Hi, Daniella. Daniella is an amazing artist, speaking about art and how it can positively impact conservation. Daniella has a question here, or a comment. Can't wait to get my hands on the book. Yay! Go get it, guys. It's really, really great. And I have to read the whole thing personally. And then I have a question here from John. How is the 101 Wildlife Crossing going? So I'll take a stab at this. But we are on, we are on a great track with the Save LA Cougars campaign. We're going to be coming out with some new updates on our Facebook page. So keep an eye on P22's Facebook page in the next few weeks. We're going to be posting some awesome events, both in person and virtual. And we'll be giving detailed updates on the wildlife crossing. So stay tuned for that. And of course, follow the hashtag Save LA Cougars. Let's see here. Thank you for sharing this beautiful book. You've captured the issue of roads and wildlife wonderfully. We are so proud to have you and Smoky Safe Passage as a partner for this important work.
And that's Ashley. Hi, Ashley. I'm glad you're here. And we love what you all do. And so many of our partners, like Ashley at Summit County Safe Passages in Colorado, they're beyond where we are. Like, we're just fledglings. We're just learning to fly here. So they share things with us and we learn from them. And one of the reasons I wanted to do a children's book is because in 10 years, the people that read this book today and are 12 are maybe going to be the wildlife engineers that are going to finish this project. So we really hope that you will read this and share it with your youngsters, because we need people to focus on this area of science and nature.
Well, this was so fun, Frances. I just want to give everybody one more minute to ask a question or put your comments in. But is there anything else you'd like to say, Frances, for today?
Well, I just appreciate everybody for prioritizing this and making time to learn about it. The song that we're going to be hearing in just a minute, I want to mention, is written by me, but one of my good friends in Switzerland got so excited about this cause that she took it and wrote a different melody that she wanted to do with her band, Smile. And so she did a really cool version of Safe Passage Animals Need a Hand. This past weekend at my house, I had a big film crew, and we just did a recording of the song, the actual melody that I wrote, and that's going to be coming out in a couple of months as a music video that's going to show animals in wildlife crossings, as well as this beautiful band called The Fates in Asheville, North Carolina.
Awesome. Yes. And just before we play the video, just a friendly reminder, go grab your books, Smoky's information, .org. And also you can visit the website smokysafepassage.org as well. Tony, behind the scenes, just want to give a huge shout out to Tony for helping with the production of today's event. And Tony's going to go ahead and play that video for us as we exit the event. And I hope that everybody has a lovely day. And I'm going to mute myself, and then we're going to play the video. So thank you, everyone.
Black bear, and I'm following an ancient trail. I am a bear by the side of the road. I'll wait to follow the ancient trail, cut through by the interstate. Safe passage, animals need a hand. Let's change our roads to help them cross, move over this land. I am a deer, and I die every day. Oh, try to make life whole. The large as well as the small. I am an elk, and I have to travel to thrive. Oh, following the ancient trail, I'll keep trying to stay alive. Safe passage, animals need a hand. Let's change our roads to help them cross and move over this land. Safe passage, safe passage, safe passage, safe passage, safe passage. Animals need to cross. Let's change our roads to save their lives and share this beautiful